Hello, everyone. Welcome to part 8 of the series, Are We Born Sinners? At the end of part 7, I brought up the Noah's flood story and talked about the fact that there are many ancient civilizations that also have flood stories. And these civilization stories, most of them predate the Bible. So I wanted to talk a little bit in this video about the relevance of that information. Now, most people that believe in the Bible, when they hear about these things, just quickly disregard them and say things like, well, obviously Satan knew God's plan, so he inputted these things within history, or somehow he, is responsible or behind this to cause us or trying to cause us not to believe in the Bible. But in my opinion, that doesn't make any sense at all. Is a thing called faith and there is a thing called facts. And when the facts are leading you in a particular direction, it would be wise for you to look further into that direction. But when it comes to any type of scientific or archaeological facts that disprove the Bible or call into question some of the concepts or stories in the Bible, most Bible believers just disregard it at that point. They believe it up to that point, but then when it starts to conflict, they just disregard it. But in this situation, I don't think that should be disregarded. Okay, now, before I get into the relevance, let me just read off a couple of the names of some of these civilizations that have flood stories. Now, I say a couple because there's a lot. Pretty much most cultures in the ancient world had a story like this. But here are a few: Sumerian, Akkadian, Babylonian, Hindu, Greek, Chinese, and Mayan. I also found a video that I think is pretty neutral. This channel called Atlas Pro, and it's just talking about, is there any truth to any of these flood myths? I'm going to link that in the description. The guy is not really trying to persuade you one way or the other what to believe, but just showing you what the proof is out there and what some of these stories are. Okay, so if you want to hear more information about this, check out that link. But the relevance of this is the fact that many of these ancient cultures, like I said, first of all, their stories predate the Bible, okay? But also the timing of when these stories, of that they took place would have been at a time when people in the ancient world were not communicating across oceans. So it's not like they would have had the internet or computers or television and they could corroborate their stories and all write down stories about a flood. No, this was something that was left preserved on tablets and different type of things that was found by archaeologists that showed a history of a flood. Whether this was a worldwide flood or not, that is something that is debated by archaeologists, but from the evidence, it seems that something actually did happen. A lot of these cultures lived by big bodies of water, and those bodies of water were prone to flooding. So some of the reason why they could have gotten stories that this was a worldwide flood could be because, as far as the eye can see, everywhere around you that you look, there's water. If you don't have a boat or you don't have powerful, telescope or binoculars or something like that, you may not be able to see how far this goes, but your whole entire worldview could be covered with water. So that could be how some of the ancient cultures got those type of stories. But one thing that's very evident is that all of these stories differ. Not all of them go in line with the way the Noah's Ark story goes. Some of them do. Some of them have to do with God or the gods being upset at humanity, One of them even said that humanity was being too noisy. It's kind of funny when you start looking into them and some of the things that they say. But some of them were not even anything that had to do with God. It was more just like natural disaster. And they didn't have anything to do, some of them, with people being preserved, like how Noah was specifically told to build an ark. That was not always the case. Some of them were. They had people being preserved because they were told by the gods to build a boat. But some of them, people just went on higher ground and was able to survive this natural disaster. So it's really interesting, and I would suggest that you do a little bit more research into this, okay? But the reason why this becomes relevant in this discussion is because the consensus for those who believe in the Bible as far as why this flood was done is because of mankind's sin. Okay? So anything that can call that into question should make you think. If there's all of these ancient flood stories that predate the Bible that have all of these different reasons given about why a flood happened, how can we be so sure that it is really because of mankind's sin? Now, I understand, like I said, Bible believers, why you believe this. But if you are choosing not to do any outside research, that is on you. But there is a lot of research to do that could potentially make you call into question some of these concepts. So another thing that was a part of this whole flood story was the Nephilim. So I wanted to mention a scripture that Moses supposedly wrote in Genesis 6:4 when he talked about the Nephilim. So let me read that for you, and I'm in the New International Version. Here's what it says. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of men and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. Okay, so first thing I want to say, isn't it so interesting, you guys, how something so major, like supposedly these angels from heaven coming down, having sex with women on earth, creating these giants, and this being the cause, one of the main causes of why Jehovah supposedly caused this worldwide flood, right? That is something major, but it only gives us a few verses in the Bible. I always thought that was kind of weird. You know, it just kind of mentions it. It's like it's just trying to give us this small piece of the puzzle, but it doesn't want to go into many details. Well, the reason why I find that this is relevant is because many of the cultures that I mentioned that have these flood stories, and also many, many others, have stories of great men, demigods, if you will, these great and powerful men that existed in ancient times, okay? And obviously, we see the Bible referencing that here. We see Moses saying, these were the heroes of old, the men of renown. Obviously, Moses is saying were because this was something that happened hundreds of years before he was alive. You know, I'm saying in the context of if this was true. That's why he would be saying it that way. It was something that happened before he lived, okay? But there's no details given. So I find that very interesting that other cultures that predate the Bible gives us some details about this. Now, some who are Bible believers who believe in some of the extra biblical works like the Book of Enoch would point to that and say, well, this goes into more, detail about this whole thing, and which it really does. I think the Book of Enoch is pretty interesting. We talk about this whole Nephilim thing and how humanity was corrupted and the animals were corrupted and all of this type of stuff. If you have never read it, I would suggest looking at it a little bit because it is pretty interesting. But obviously there's more to this story. You could tell if you only read the Bible and it just mentions these sons of God and these heroes. It makes you say, what is this about? And we just don't question it. As far as when I was a Bible believer, we didn't really try to think too much about this. We obviously felt like, well, I guess God didn't really want to give us any more details, so he just said that, But the fact that these ancient civilizations have stories about great men and powerful men that actually existed on the earth, that shows you that what the Bible is saying is actually referencing something that actually happened. But the problem is we look at all those stories from these ancient cultures as myths, as something that really didn't happen, as, made up, or something, again, like I said, Satan is putting out there. But there could be some truth to what it is that they're talking about. But this would not go necessarily with this whole storyline of the Bible because it predated the Bible. So to me, I think this is really interesting to find out more about, this earth and what we have going on as humanity. You just stick with the Bible and think that that's historical, you're not getting a huge piece of what actually, got us up to this point. It's so much more to it. So that's pretty much all I wanted to touch on with that, you guys. Do your own research. I always encourage that. Never take my word or anybody else's word for anything that we say on YouTube. It's just a little bit of information to get you to think, but go ahead and do your own research on these things, okay? Okay, now, obviously, this whole flood thing and this whole Nephilim thing all was supposedly done because of the sin of mankind. We are supposed to be sinners, right? But when we use that term, sinner, what exactly does that mean? Obviously, we know that to sin means to transgress divine law. But whose divine law are we talking about? Join me on part 9 as I go